going through a lot of material after the Newcastle workshop, and through the material which was sent to me by Olivia and Prue, and also relying on my weak memory, like human memory, but relying still on my impressions, I found, this picture. I don't know whether you see it, perhaps not so very well. I was going through the competition projects of non-architects who are going to present today, and saw such a project, and especially on this perspective, the first picture. And it says, Introduction to Sociology. Session starts in 10 minutes. And this project was presented by two students. One was landscape architect and the other was the student of fine arts. So they were reaching across the disciplines, which for me was just a symbolic sign that there is really willingness and for interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, which has been the ethos of our work throughout these years, actually. So, Yeah, and also it was an exchange between generations, disciplines, and so on and so forth, with students presenting their works, and all the words, the discussions were visualized, which was also perfect, interconnecting between disciplines. And in the end, I came up with these particular notions, drawing on all the lectures and sessions what we had, that really we share a lot of concerns continuously, challenges and dreams. And what I liked about this presentation today, and also the students' presentation, that we still manage to dream. And please have a look at these ideas which came up from these sessions in Newcastle, and then perhaps if we have time we can develop on them. Otherwise we move on, and I'm really honored to give the floor to Olivia first. Yes, please.
Thank you, Catherine. I will just say one word about the wonderful set of events which Prue and Marta and Luca will illustrate. As chair of INTREPID, I have struggled immensely with the literature on inter and transdisciplinarity, partly because I don't have time to read it. That's the truth, but when I do, it is so abstract. It's so intangible for me. And so I asked Prue, who was wonderful because she's a busy lady, but she took up my plia. And I said, can you help me to translate this in 2 and 3 dimension? Because I feel that there is something about the space and place of knowledge that can help us to move forward beyond the ideas and the grand statements into something that we can feel. And the embodiment debate, which we have touched upon using the word or is of course the connection here. So I want to thank Prue again because she did an amazing job. And I just have to say 2 words about my left colleagues here, because they were also incredibly generous. So what happened is I had a wonderful dinner with a wonderful friend who's sitting here but will not stand up. Okay, fine. And we were talking about our many things, and she said, I've just joined this group of young architects who are working on digital platforms, and we do competitions online. And I said, oh, really? I just have the topic for you. How about the future space and place of universities and knowledge? And within no time, I was delivered a perfect competition globally. We even have a draft book. I mean, I'm so impressed. I just want to thank everyone and pass the word to Prue. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Would you like? No. You. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Please go on.
Right, Marta. I'm going to try and keep it in one place. This microphone. Okay. Sorry, there are rather a lot of words here, and all I really want to say actually is to respond to the talks this morning and to try and show an example of what I tried to do in this kind of workshop symposium, which fitted all my criteria of spending quite a lot of my time teaching future architects and also responding to the way we'd done events all the way through the 4 years that we've been in INTREPID. And that was, and I suppose one of the first things, is that upside down? Yeah. Whoops. There. Can you put it back on there? I don't know how I've done that. Where do I haven't used this one before. Which
This
one
way.
do you? Oh, it's that way. Sorry. And that was what we tried to do, is put something on which reflected the city that we were in. And I feel that my quite newly adopted city of Newcastle and quite new university, which is a very beautiful city, quite poor, has 2 big successful universities, very successful hospitals, all the things that can make a civilized kind of society, and how kind of neglected it is and how radical it was in the 19th century. And my first point is that we really need to use our history because we started, and not unlike here, and not like the fantastic tour we had yesterday, learning about the history of institutions and the amazing institutions in Newcastle, which exported their engineers around the world for 100 years and was the place for creating technology, safety in mines, and had public libraries earlier for the people, and I'm talking about the Literary and Philosophical Society. So so that was the first point I wanted to make. The city that we're in is really important, and how we can help that city. And I just really want to go through a project and talk about my students and how they responded to this. Sorry, this isn't working, this one. Oh, that one, sorry, beg your pardon. And so I actually employed Safira. I always believe in employing students and paying them for absolutely everything they do, and they do a lot for me personally in both my practice life and my academic life. But they all helped. I had 7 M.Arch architecture students helping. And the other thing, in their thesis studios, they were all 6th year students. They used the themes of the symposium for their year-long. I mean, they'd already started and done quite a lot of research, and that fed into the symposium, but they're now finishing off their projects. We've done this, and this is the exhibition that they created. So the participants of the competition could see that their work had been exhibited, and great, now we have a second fantastic exhibition. And there they are. It snowed while we were there, didn't it? They looked like they're in snow gear, now we're in summer gear. And that was dramatic. This is a rather obscure image with Atlantis with his hand coming down on the Civic Centre in Newcastle, because the next point I want to make is that students of architecture in their final years, we like them to work with the city, and this particular group also exhibited this, which was a re-look at how the universities, both universities, and here should surround the Civic Centre. This is a marvellous listed building, modernist building, right next to the university. And they wrote a manifesto when they were asked to work with traffic engineers, transport engineers in the civic, who were in the Civic Centre there. They were asked to look at that whole bit in the centre there, at the side, which is a mess, and it's the entrance to the university. But they said, well, how can we link the universities? And they did this whole project and presented it. And you could see the eyes of the traffic engineers who were going, oh my God, we asked them to do a small exercise, and they've redesigned the whole of the area. But then they came up with a really practical solution that the traffic engineers, who are very beleaguered, like all local authorities are in the UK, that actually they could use those images to apply for money, which the local authority did. They got the money and now can do the whole scheme. And that was a really good example of how the students within their year, they all worked together as a team with their different roles, actually managed to do that. So in this few days, I thought we had to have kind of some thematics. So we split it into 3 themes, all of which are very close to my heart. And perhaps the one that I grew up with people like John Goddard, the most beautiful speech about the nature of collegiality being the most important thing in a university, and however much you're trying to get your research rating up or anything else like that, if you don't be a good colleague, and that includes the management of the university. And I actually do believe, compared to my old university, the management is fantastic. And I was so reassured by that, because I wasn't quite sure, when you ask someone to open a session, and she was marvellous. But anyway, I also included or involved my practice, thanks to Olivia, who paid through INTREPID for them to come up and enable the workshops, because we have a kind of 20-year history of kind of participatory architecture. And so it was really nice for the first time since I've been there, thanks to INTREPID, that I could mix my practice and my academic kind of world. And we really went through a lot of the themes that have come up in lots of INTREPID workshops before, and these are just 1 or 2 themes. I had a really wonderful student, actually from Westminster, one of Julio's students, so I borrowed another INTREPID student and paid her, and she wrote up, and I've really just used her words. There were many other themes that came from the discussions. Perhaps the Civic University one was a little depressing, that we don't have the time, the money, to be good enough as Civic University. But the really important thing is that we need to be, as well as good lecturers, inspiring, ethical cosmopolitan, we need to be good citizens too, and get involved. And the second theme that we looked at was the knowledge economy. And we've also talked about this a lot in many things. And I had 2 colleagues who are very involved in that, who've written a lot about these subjects, and who spoke on that. And then again, we had a workshop that developed those things. So, and we spent a bit more time. We tried to give time to the workshops. And then there were themes emerging for this, which were, to me, very, very useful, but the one that I really wanted to prioritise was the idea that we have new ways of researching through making and through drawing, which I really wanted to pursue. And then finally, very close to my heart again, because I've worked in Africa and places like that, was the idea of the post-colonial university. And this is where Olivia again came up with some of her networks, Henrietta Palmer, who brought a student of hers, and Ian Lowe, who talked really brilliantly about, and to me, we haven't really talked about this in INTREPID, how universities in post-colonial countries, need to change, have the right to change much more than they're able to change at the moment, because why should they still be on the British or the French model of universities? And how relevant are they? And the really interesting thing, I think, that came out of this, for me, of many, many things, and everyone participated brilliantly in this, and I'm just romping through this, because what I really want to say... Oh, and then we had he's really not pompous like that. One of our... he's not really a star architect, as someone was mentioning yesterday, but he's building more university buildings than anyone else in the country, but from really trying to make it work. And his level of research really impressed us in his talk, because we wanted to talk about the actual real space that's been created. And the other thing I wanted to mention, that the space that we spent the 3 days in was actually designed by one of my students who worked for the Estates Department in their year out as well, which was quite special. And so what I just want to say is how my students picked up on these themes in the end, and with their projects. And 2 of them actually were from Malaysia. So the post-colonial debate was really fascinating to them. Am I right for a couple more minutes? Yeah. Yep. And yeah, sorry, I'll go back to this. I've got some more of it. And they have both picked up very much on post-colonial literature, which had been introduced to them before, but they saw it actually in action during the symposium. And they're both One's Malay, one's Chinese Malay, and they're both designing very different projects in Kuala Lumpur, which are bringing up the really big issues of climate change in Kuala Lumpur and the climate problems, as well as looking at very different models for a university. And this student, who's born and bred and absolutely passionate about Newcastle, is the one that's pursuing the Civic University. And the idea that came up with just you guys, just in your last talk, was that we need to be far more open and show far more clearly what we're doing in universities by having open exhibition areas and also inviting people in with ideas. This is his big thing. He comes from an alternative route to education. Invite people in with ideas and take them seriously when they're not part of the academy, and that's something we're not very good at doing at universities. This student has picked up on the idea, and I suppose I'm trying to show that they're all looking at really serious world problems, where there are, and societal problems, in order to develop a project through that. This student is looking at mental health and well-being of students, and that's very much a problem with new residences and how students live at universities. There's a lot more loneliness. There's a lot more, the whole idea of the halls of residence where you live together in communities has sort of been broken down with the privatisation and all the rest of it. So that is one of the really big issues. And then this one was about Milton Keynes, one of our new cities, and his idea that we should the Open University, which is one of the great institutions of the UK, which is struggling a bit now with technology, with open technology and lots of different ways that we're learning, and how that could become a far bigger part in regenerating the whole of Milton Keynes through a kind of Future Learn Expo, where all the universities have kind of the potential to exhibit there, and it's on the HS2 route, and it does two jobs of both regenerating a city, saving the Open University. Anyway, small things like that. These are the post-colonial ones. I'll just go through that. And this one, I just wanted to end on this because we've managed to form, and this is something else that's come out of INTREPID, a really good relationship with the British Library. And are in conversation actually with the director of the British Library, who's very concerned at the way universities use the British Library. And this one is suggesting that British libraries should go to all the poorer seaside cities and have outposts there. And they shouldn't just be small outposts, they should be great big grand places that school children can go and do their homework. And Scarborough is one example of places like that where it's a beautiful place to go, but it's absolutely has a very low proportion of students going to university. And then finally, and you might realise that they were all picking up with not just one of the themes, but maybe others. And this very much is to do with the future knowledge economy. And this was that we need to, again, regenerate. This is a very poor docks area in Blythe, just north of, and there actually is an outpost of the university here, but to actually use it to again regenerate the town and create much better links with Scandinavia and some of the huge research projects on shipping, naval architecture, energy that are going on there. So I just wanted to, we'll go back to these themes because they all seem to be very appropriate, but not before I wanted to leave some time for you guys to talk about the non-university.
Exactly.
Well, Marta. Yeah, well, there's a lack of software here, so that might be challenging, but we will tell you a little story, and I promise they'll be quick, and Marco will help me scrolling down, but that's a bit... No. So the computer crashed, and I will just go freestyle. Yeah, well, let's do like this, Marco. Today, we wanted just to share a bit, very quickly, of what was our experience with INTREPID. And how we got to, be students a few years back, in university, and then imagining what the non-university would be. So with non-architecture, what is a new model to reinvent the university. And to do that, maybe we'll start quickly from this drawing. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it, but that's the allegory of the cave from Plato. And I'm showing this not because we studied philosophy, we were actually trained as architects, but because that's the very base which is used for architecture tutors and professors to elaborate the most common and harsh comment they can provide when looking at your student project. And that comment is the following, Marco. Thanks. This is not architecture. They look at your work and they say, God, this is not architecture. This is interior design. This is communication, PR. But that's definitely non-architecture. And what happens is that they're saying there is a discipline, there is architecture, and that's in the world of ideas, that's where I am enlightened, I know what it is, and you're not in it. You're placed with the big crowd, looking at shadows of statues and believing that's real, but it's not. I know what architecture is, you're not in it. I mean, I don't know if there are architects in the group or trained as architects, but I'm sure you've heard this. I've heard it a lot, in 3 different countries at least, and I have proof for that. If we move forward, that's the Guggenheim Museum. I imagine many of you know the architect, the very famous Frank Gehry. Well, Frank Gehry was in a press conference in 2014, and if you move to the next slide, they had an issue. Now I'm quoting The Guardian. A press conference in Oviedo on Thursday got off to a bad start when a journalist asked whether Gehry's own architecture was just about spectacle. And Gehry replied like this. In case you are wondering, the blurred part is the middle finger. He gave the middle finger to the journalist. Then, of course, he elaborated further. He said, let me tell you one thing, he replied. In this world we are living in, 98% of everything that is built and designed today, it's pure shit. There is no sense of design, no respect for humanity or for anything else. No respect for humanity. They are damn buildings and that's it. Once in a while, however, a group of people do something special. Very few, but God, leave us alone. So what Gehry is saying, actually, is that there is a 2% that knows what architecture is, and 98% of those that practice architecture, so not those that studied architecture or like architecture, that don't know what architecture is. There is a discipline, you are not in it. And, well, at the time, no, go back. Thanks. At the time when this happened, Marco and I were graduating. Marco was in Turkey doing his project. I was in the Netherlands. And as a student, you directly land on Gehry's middle finger. I mean, you're learning architecture. For sure you don't know architecture. So we were there, and the dream of every architecture student is to start your own practice and become a star architect just like Gehry and change the world with your own amazing ideas. But then Gehry gives you the middle finger, and you're like, okay, maybe that's not the way. Maybe we can do something else. Why not work with the rest of the 98% and do something else? Empower this mass with new meaning. And that's what we started testing out. We established open source research. We wanted to have a platform for everyone to contribute with meaningful or less meaningful ideas without providing evaluation you fit or don't fit into architecture. So no profit, no stars. When you're a student, profit is out of the equation, even later I would say, but that's another story. So we had to establish one thing, like one first parameter. Whatever we did with the 98%, well, that wouldn't have been architecture. But at the same time, we thought, okay, it might not be architecture today, but it might be tomorrow. So let's say yet. It might touch upon architecture. It might not fit into it. It might change. Architecture might change or disappear. But our goal was, let's clarify that what we do doesn't belong to a discipline. And I'm telling this story like this today because we met INTREPID, because I wouldn't have said this a long time ago. And I think that may be one lesson we learned already. But within architecture, we established a program of design contests. What we wanted to do was challenge architects to do something interesting for them. So when you talk to a large crowd, when you talk to a community, you have to speak their language. And ideas competitions were the language that at the same time seemed to us more plausible because they're very common with architects. We just tweaked a bit the program. We established 9 competitions on 9 themes we believed were relevant. And then we opened it to the community with a very simple process. We would feed participants or anyone interested with a newsletter. So that's why you see our logo there. Then we would select out of all the submissions 50 finalists and pass them to a jury The jury will select 3 winners, which are purely symbolic. It's only to motivate people to commit. And then those winners will get a monetary prize. The rest of the 50 plus extra content would be collected in a book. We did this for 9 topics, and we got amazing results. I have to say that if 3 years ago someone would have come there and told me this, I would have been very excited. And one overall is the fact that more than 1,300 teams, which are mainly 3-4 people, participated into this. So we managed to achieve and to engage a big community. And we did this thanks mostly to these people, our team. Because curiously, while we were trying to engage a community, we built a little, let's say, family or community on our own. But each one of us was located somewhere else. So we were lucky enough to attract very smart, talented people all around the world and still communicate remotely. So these 9 people for me were mainly a Skype avatar and an image. But then, let's say there was a twist into this process, or something that really for us meant a turning point. We, through our amazing team members, we met Veronica and INTREPID. And luckily for us, like they already said, our program already was touching upon education. INTREPID was investigating universities. It was a perfect match. It was love at first sight. So we arrived one day in a hotel in San Sebastian, completely clueless, and we left after 3 days in love with INTREPID, in love with the transdisciplinarity and with the challenge of bringing our passion for community and co-creation into the spatial challenge of universities. So with INTREPID, we launched Learning Alternative Designs for Universities, competition that lasted 4 months. Some of the results were presented. I will now maybe go briefly through it. Well, we had as a jury, well, I would say an amazing panel. The first one is Astrid Piper from UN Studio, one of the largest architecture firms in the Netherlands. We had Arjen Waltz, which was one of the speakers in this event. And then, of course, we had Prue, which helped us and fed us with a lot of energy, with Olivia and the rest of INTREPID. So we managed to communicate to our participants through the newsletter inputs and insights on the work of INTREPID and the theories we discussed today and in the past events. And maybe I'll briefly go through the 3 winners, but I really encourage you later to have a look further. This was one of the winners, and it was all about a new digital reality. So let's take universities, dematerialize them, and transform them into a completely new experience for your brain. So it becomes complete detachment. And if you scroll down, we have the second winner, which was about enhanced reality. So technology comes and helps you experience reality in a new way. So technology and reality come together, and you get this augmented experience. And finally, the last winner was all about the space and how new configuration for space can challenge your curiosity and therefore trigger you into interact differently and exchange knowledge differently. So it was all about, corridors, terraces, interactions, and that was the one actually that Prue selected. I was really glad because I think it embeds quite strongly most of the values we try to promote in this kind of events. I told you not to say that. Yeah. So. No, I thought that was good that we're yeah. Yeah, no, it was completely. Yeah, all the jurors worked separately, so there was no bias in that. We are very good at working separately and still together. That's our specialty. So in Newcastle, we had an exhibition with the 50 finalist students. And thanks again to your students, Prue, that put together something so good. And then we moved to Lisbon, and in Lisbon, we had to come up with creative solutions. And this time, Daniela and Veronica helped us out with a smart hanger system to still be able to show you today the 50 finalist projects of this competition. So I really encourage you to go have a look later during lunch, even if it's going to be quite short today. I'm sorry for that. I feel guilty. But also, the results will be collected in the book. We have a hard copies here and there. Yeah, Olivia can show you. So come have a look. We collected articles from INTREPID, the projects, our own feedback. It's a very open source process, so if you feel like contributing, we are really looking forward for it. And hopefully it will be like a distilled experience of what this whole process was about. And I would say, I want to close quickly just to mention 3 lessons, since we're in university, let's still call them like that, we got from this whole experience. And I think lesson number one, it's definitely get ice cream in Lisbon. The people you see over there are 4 of our team members, and they're all here today. And I think we have been working remotely for a long time, and it's challenging, it's hard, and everything you know about that person is a phone call and a Skype avatar, like I said before. And then yesterday I get out of the ice cream shop, we sneaked out for lunch, and I see the 4 of them having ice cream, and they were real people, they were humans. So, you know, for the first time we were present in what we were doing, and I think that was one of the biggest gifts that INTREPID gave us, both as in terms of awareness, you know, it's one of the values you promote, and that's clear and impactful, but also as a chance to come together with all of you. And now I see lots of familiar faces I met before and experience this emotionally, not only, you know, intellectually or rationally from far away. And the second lesson is definitely establish multiple conversations. So there's not one way to talk. And the more you are able to tailor different languages and different conversation, the more you engage. And this requires listening. And I think during the INTREPID workshops, we really tested many of those, these different languages. And we are now at the end of our program. So we did our 9 competitions, and it was for us a turning point. And we used that lesson to let's say, inspire us for the next step. So new ways to engage larger communities. And we will launch, hopefully soon, a blog where anyone can update content and articles and projects. So completely democratic and anarchic. And at the same time, we'll launch a studio to do a bit more focused effort, be more aware, and let's say more tailored on the work of INTREPID, kind of create smaller groups, be there, and work together close in intense interaction. And my last lesson is that if you go downstairs and look at the projects, or if you think about the results of many of the workshops we had in Newcastle or in San Sebastian as well, well, it will turn out that many of the conclusions don't look anything like universities. And I wanted to conclude saying, don't look like anything like universities, so these are not universities yet. But I decided to not do that. Because I started feeling, and this is a bit also an ongoing discussion, I mean, we understood through this experience that we need knowledge exchange, we need empathy, we need presence, awareness. But are we really sure we need universities for this? That's a question and a doubt I want to share with you all, because it might very well be that the university of the future is just not a university. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Olivia, Prue, especially for this, giving this experience just, and of course, Marco and Luca. Now the floor is open to the discussion.
First of all, I want to thank non-architects, because I think this is a very impressive initiative. And what I want to share with you is that I had the privilege to be in Newcastle and see all these panels that they exhibited there in the place in which the workshop was done. And I photographed all of the different panels. I talked this to Luca when we met. And then I shared all these photographs with my team back in Bilbao. We are working in trying to connect universities and different stakeholders. So somehow we are working in the future of universities. So for us, when I share with my team all these different works, some of them are very bizarre, some of them are more plausible. So for us, these different proposals are a source of inspiration. So I think this is a very nice job, and I can tell you that we are taking advantage of it and we are using it. So it is not just the contest, okay? Thank you very much, because I think it's
actually, I have to thank you all. I think what we feel is that for us, these kind of opportunities are extremely meaningful. I mean, getting the opportunity to dialogue on such teams and working with you all, it's a great experience. It gives a lot of value to what we do. That's what gets us going, let's say. So in case you want to keep on the discussion, or anyone else wants to start new ones, we're always happy to do that.
Thank you, Luca, for the very great presentation of this idea. Especially, we are thinking at the transdisciplinary university of the future, something, but the idea that it's not a university is also, I think, a very good one. My question is about, which is connected also to a presentation before, the work that is done by the student before showing the slide with the online at the center of the slide as the main word for the young people. With your experience on the platform, having with this competition triggered a virtuous use of the virtual environment, so virtuous in terms of generating a collection of ideas. Something about how to manage this process online in your experience, because we have done a lot of experience of collaboration, but being in the room, embodying, having a face-to-face relationship is a key element of this. I'm always wondering how to reproduce, how to have, not to reproduce that, but at least a good way for using internet for really having an exchange of people and generating ideas and not influence or I would say something which is not so valuable.
Okay. I think, let's say for us, a lot of work, like with Mark, we wanted to do something like that, but a lot of work went into first understanding what others wanted to say. So we didn't establish the discussion, we captured what people were already willing to share. We just gave them the opportunity to do that. And I think everyone in our team works on this because they believe in it. It gives them pleasure. So somehow this happens despite the fact that it's online, because this desire of being together and collaborating is so strong on those topics, or getting together and get creative, that at the end of the day, that's what drives everyone. So I think it's not about how you involve them, it's what you share. And people will come if there is something meaningful to share, or it's framed in a way they can relate to.
Yes. Can I just sure. You've just reminded me of something I have to share with your question, because you put up that wonderful photo of us in our meeting at the hotel, and I've just been reminded of how embarrassing that meeting was for me with self-reflection, because I just remember me going to this meeting and thinking, you know, I'm this incredibly cool researcher who is now going to teach these two kids how they're going to run this competition for us. And it really didn't work. And Marta was with me, of course, and it really didn't work out that way. And it was too fast for me to understand what had hit me. But basically, I was sitting down there telling them, you know, this has got to be sustainable, about sustainable futures. It's got to be this and that and the other. And they super politely, but very firmly, which also surprised me, is like, where is the hierarchy here? It's gone, but wakey, wakey. And they said, no, actually, I think we should leave the terms of reference pretty open and let people respond. And that was such a fun. So it's not only you who's been learning here, I can tell you. It was the beginning of a long journey, so thank you.
You see, it makes me laugh. You still talk about the star architects. And I must say, one of my students worked for one of the key star architects before he came back, David Chipperfield. And we're having this discussion about whether his architecture, and you can probably tell the one Freddie's one with the kind, is this really the appropriate architecture that you're trying to design? And but within a very long education, you called it a training. I like to think it's an education as well as a training, skills and all the things. You do learn how to present, you learn how to look after your ideas, you learn how to be citizens of the world, I think. That's, I think, the most important thing about it. So maybe your architecture education wasn't so bad after all.
Despite that.
Yeah, indeed, it was really connecting to the world, to people's worlds. More questions, please?
Well, thank you for a fantastic presentation. Really great to see that architecture enters the room this way as you have presented it here. So that's great. I just have one question that, I mean, with this intervention, you established the notion that the universities of tomorrow cannot be created without also the spaces related to this pedagogy, and this attitude must be changed also. So I just wonder if you have some kind of characteristics for these new spaces. What is the characteristics for promoting, for instance, in transdisciplinarity in education? I come to think about for once, there's some examples perhaps in my own school actually a little bit with the refurbishments that have done that. So facilitating the meetings between people is essential. And I come to think about Sana and the building in Lausanne also, the seamless relation between different rooms and different levels. So I just wanted to, what are your reflections on that point? I mean, are there any general characteristics since you have been pondering about these ideas for a long time now? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very hard question, I have to say. Mostly because we always try to approach architectural topics in a very abstract way and let the community respond with spatial insights. So we never, we provide very few spatial references or architectural references on purpose. So I don't think I can answer your question, but mostly because it depends a lot on what you're aiming for. I could tell you that a piece of furniture might do the job as well as an entire building sometimes. And it's such a wide range of references that I cannot take a position on that. What I can say is that very often the feeling is that buildings, the way we consider them, so the university as a tower, building, or a block, might not be needed anymore. So everyone tends to blur the boundaries of the building and bring in the city, and interaction becomes much more natural. And then maybe you don't treat students, as teachers anymore when they don't have, you know, the stage to do that. That's my personal insight. I don't know if it's a shared feeling. Somehow. At the end of the day, our aim was to do something that wasn't architecture, so we're trying to go as far as we can in that direction.
What we have learned here to distinguish between the word place and the word space, what you just said, it means that maybe universities don't need a place in the sense that it is a physical building with fixtures and corridors and rooms, but they will still need a space in a cognitive sense that you have to connect people. And maybe people don't need to meet in the physical space, they can meet anywhere, but particularly because in urban areas, it's easier to find other solutions for people to learn and meet. So we're very much in line in the same.